From can everyone hear us okay online?
Yeah, sure can. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Don, you'd like to lead us in the invocation?
Let us pray. Thank you for this day and the blessings you bestow upon us. Help us be respectful to each other and tolerant towards others' opinions. Bless us as we conduct our business. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Pledge.
Stand with me. Raise the flag, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you all. The determination of a quorum.
Mr. Chairman, you have a quorum in the room.
We'll start off with welcome and introductions. I'll start off. I'm the chairman, Jason Bellows from Lancaster County, and we'll proceed to my left here.
Nancy Long, Carolina County.
Judge Steph, Hanover, Carolina, Stormwater Conservation District.
John Gerlach, City of Fredericksburg.
Jim White, Orange County Supervisor. Emmett Hanger, Virginia Senate.
Kevin Moore, Boston County. Woody Henson, Westmoreland County.
Don Harris, Supervisor, Middlesex County.
Philip Scott, Virginia House of Delegates.
Monica Gary, Stafford County.
Martina James staff.
Jillian Salt, staff.
And Elton James staff.
And we can go around the outside of the room here.
Drew Andon, DEQ, Water Permitting Division.
Madison Peter, Program Associate for Wetlands Watch. Michelle Edwards, Rappahannock, Regional Commission.
John Basin, Northern Aquiline District. Julie Peters with the first group.
Meredith Kaplan with the Bird Rock Regional Commission.
Friend Hunter, Friends of the Rappahannock. Brad Taylor, Virginia Farm Bureau.
And Tommy Blackwell, Commissioner of Revenue, Essex County, and friend of the Rappahannock.
And we will go online. Do you want to call the roll of who's going on?
Well, let's start with a member from Rappahannock County, Van Carney. Introduce yourself.
Hello, I'm Van Carney. I'm a supervisor from the Stonewall Hawthorne District in Rappahannock County. Thanks for having me.
Okay, we have representatives standing in for Senator Reeves.
Hi, my name is James Manitz. I'm Senator Reeves' Legislative Director. Bryce is the representative for the 17th District of Virginia.
And let's see, observing today from Orange County, Ted.
Ted Voorhees, County Administrator, Orange County.
Okay, and a new member of our technical committee from the National Weather Service, Jeremy. We can get over.
Hi, everybody. This is Jeremy Geiger at the National Weather Service, Baltimore, Washington. I'm the new hydrologist here. I'm excited to be involved in these meetings.
Ready, everyone? Welcome everybody present and welcome everybody online. Thank you all for attending today and welcome to the beautiful Meadow Event Park here. Thanks to our host for hosting us today. First up will be review and approval of the agenda from our last meeting in the fall. And the FY23 work plan update. Are there any questions or comments regarding that? Otherwise, I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? Motion carries. Next up will be public comments. Is there anybody wishing to address the mission in person today? Seeing none, is there anybody online who wishes to address the commission today? Hearing none, I will move on from the public comment period to our first presentation, recent stormwater guidance and solar policy. Drew.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
I'll go ahead and load the presentation, but as I said earlier, I'm doing game with DEQ. I work for the Water Permitting Division. I was talking to Mr. James earlier. So yeah, the last time that I spoke to the commission in person was probably since a decade ago. And then did it about 6 or 7 years ago. But I'm a product of the Middle Basin. So I grew up in Rappahannock. Have parents that still live there. I've been with DEQ for about 12 years now, working on year number 13. But before that, I did water, wastewater, stormwater, land development all across the Commonwealth, but predominantly in Northern Virginia and Middle Peninsula and Northern. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the agency's most recent stormwater guidance documents that we public noticed earlier this year, and we are working to finalize those and have them effective shortly after the first year. And part of that conversation about solar development and or the memos that the agency produced last March and April. So next slide. We can go ahead and skip past this slide also. So earlier this year, August of 2022, the agency put out the public comment and registered 2 guidance documents for folks to use for compliance with the state's stormwater management and erosion and sediment control programs. For folks in the room that are not as familiar or not as aware of those particular 2 programs, they set forth their policy, procedure, regulations to regulate land disturbance activities. So, you know, if you're in a jurisdiction that is subject to the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, you have an activity that disturbs land greater than 2,500 square feet, you got to do erosion and sediment control, and you got to do post-construction stormwater management. Outside of the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Area, land disturbance is greater than 10,000 square feet, you got to do erosion and sediment control, and you have to do some post-construction water quantity management. And then after that, if your land disturbance is greater than and equal to an acre, you have to do erosion and sediment control. You have to do post-construction stormwater management, but at the federal level. So underneath the Federal Clean Water Act, you have to comply with the Commonwealth's general permit for discharges of stormwater from construction activities. So a lot being said, we have tried to simplify and pull that down in 2 guidance documents to help the regulated community not only get through the process, but make the requirements a lot clearer and concise. So the first guidance document that we put together is number 22/2011, and that's entitled Streamlined Plan Review for Stormwater Management and Erosion and Sediment Control Plans. And for folks in the room that are in rural tidewater localities, a handful of years ago, a number of years ago, Delegate Hodges, the legislature got this legislation passed that put a provision into the state stormwater management regulation process by which for smaller land disturbing activities, a licensed professional engineer could go through, develop their design, certify to the local government that the design was consistent with the law regulations, and then the local governments basically, you know, push that project through with respect to approval based upon that professional certification. This guidance document builds on that concept. So, and I like to speak to that concept as a 4-legged stool. So the first thing is the plan, whether it's a stormwater plan or an ENS plan, has to be prepared by a licensed professional. That can be an engineer, that can be an architect, that can be a landscape architect, that can also be a land surveyor. As long as they're acting underneath the authority of their professional license. That's step number 1. Step number 2, or stool leg number 2, is that the plan needs to be prepared following the next guidance document. That's where I get into all of the nitty-gritty details about stormwater and ENS and everything they need to show you on those plan sheets. The third leg is prior to actually submitting that plan to the agency for review and approval, that they have another individual that has a certification from the department. We have a training and certification program for stormwater and ENS. We've had that for many decades in the Commonwealth. That one of those individuals that holds one of those certifications does a review of that professional's plan, looks at it, ensures that that plan is consistent with the law and the regs, just like that design professional has designed it. And they certify to the department that that plan is consistent. And then after that, prior to making a submission, that design professional utilizes a standardized checklist. We put together a standardized checklist that has all of the requirements all in one spot. No guessing on where stuff is, what you have to comply with, what you don't have to comply with, we put it all in place. We ask the design professional to fill in that checklist, put it on that set of plans, turn it into the agency. And then from there, we have a process by which underneath that guidance memo, we can streamline or expeditedly review and approve those plans, get them out of the door so folks can get to construction much faster. So what we've done is utilize the process by which Delegate Hodges' work got put in place for rural tidewater localities. And we are actually looking to, once this document becomes final here in January, looking to basically utilize that statewide. So the agency where we are, the stormwater and E&S authorities, that applies to state projects, that applies to federal projects, and those jurisdictions in which we operate, the program authority. So that's 55 jurisdictions across the Commonwealth. We'll be utilizing the streamlined plan review process. Just as we sit around the room here and looking at some of the names that are on the table and the jurisdictions that they represent, Mr. Henson, we'll use this in Westmoreland County. We'll use it in Orange County. We'll use it, in King and Queen. We'll use it in Middlesex, et cetera. So, it'll be an avenue out there for those design professionals and those land developers to utilize if they choose to do so. One of the other things that has come up during the comment period is the jurisdictions where they operate their own program. So like in Hanover, Spotsylvania, et cetera. They ask for clarity in terms of if those local governments choose to adopt a process that was consistent with this process or something similar. And our answer to that is most certainly yes. If that is a pathway that you prefer to utilize at the local government level, provided that it's consistent with the law and the regs, you're utilizing our guidance document as the base structure for your program. That's an acceptable pathway to the agency's mind. So where we are in this process with that particular document as it relates to land development. Underneath of the Administrative Process Act, we have to go through a process by which we, like I said, notice that document for 30 days in the public register. That was done from August 1st to August 31st. We got a handful of comments on that particular guidance document. Certainly very good comments. One of the noteworthy revisions that we did make that we are giving ready to notice was when we originally prepared that document, we had limited that streamlined process only to licensed professional engineers. We did get a lot of comments from other licensed professionals that do practice this type of stuff. So we did open up the document to those other licensed individuals, provided that they are operating in accordance with their or under the authority of their professional license. We made those amendments. We prepared a response to comments. I briefed the State Water Control Board last week on this particular guidance document. We submitted that document actually to the registrar's office early last week. It will be re-advertised because we have to go through a subsequent 30-day notification in the registrar's office, in the Virginia Register. It'll get noticed and published on December 19th for an additional 30 days, and the tentative effective date is January 19th. So that's where we are with that particular guidance document. Before I go on to the next one, take a minute, stop, see if anybody has any questions about that. Like I said, one of the things that we very much tried to do was to build on the work that Delegate Hodges had done previously, as well as set forth a pathway by which the agency could get through our obligation for plan review and approval much faster. To put that in context, the agency looks at over 400 plans a year. Last year, we approved approximately 330 plans. We do that with a very limited staff. Some of that staff do split time between field work and plan review, just like they do at the local government level. So we're looking for a pathway that will help us get through the process much faster with the personnel that we have. Questions, comments on this particular one? Yes, sir.
In terms of the scope, remind me of the conversation that I had several months back in the group. And there was a question about whether this was going to apply to all side, all steel projects or just a identified set. I haven't heard a direct answer to that.
We have not limited this to any particular.
It's not the size of it.
Yep, so, and we did that on purpose, and a lot of it has to deal with, as plans come into the agency. We're looking at size of development, we're looking at scope of development, we're looking at proximity to receiving waters, other issues, etc. So we do have, we do have a pathway underneath this guidance document that if an entity chooses to use this, we can pull that plan out of the queue and actually take a more detailed in-depth look at it if necessary. So we've left that provision in there. We've told local governments have asked for not that too. If they choose to use this, they have to let everything go. The answer to that is no, etc. And we did that as a means of providing as much flexibility, not only to the design professional, but also to us as the oversight authority. So, and part of that is as a previous designer, where you might think like a large land development project, a couple hundred acres could cause, a lot of issues, maybe downstream property owner. I can tell you, just based upon my experience, some of the more complicated sites that I've ever dealt with have always been less than an acre's worth of land service. Trying to build a 1 acre Wawa on the corner of some already, extremely developed intersection, and trying to get all of those pieces and parts. In addition to stormwater and all of the transportation needs, signalization, everything, all that stuff to work out correctly.
Any other questions?
Any other questions? All right, well, we'll go on to the second guidance document. So that's guidance memo, just the next memo of sequence 22/2012. That one is the stormwater management and erosion and sediment control design guide. So that is a 60-page document that takes proposed that may or may not have seen Director Rowland speak at different events, etc. He has this picture of all of the stormwater and ENS regulations, and it stands in a stack of about 2.5 feet tall. We took 2.5 feet tall worth of information and tried to pull that down into 60 pages. And we did that as a means of putting forth what I like to call the preferred pathway for plan development. And the reason I say is it's a preferred pathway. We cannot in a guidance document dictate or mandate one specific pathway. That would have to be done or promulgated in regulations. But we took that 2.5 feet of documentation and said what would be the preferred pathway that would allow the agency to be reasonably assured that the law and regs would be met if the design professional followed these guidelines. So we developed the document, like I said, it's 60 pages in length. We publicly noticed that particular document at the same time. So that comment period ran from August 1st to August 31st. Also, we've gone through and made amendments to that. We've prepared a response to comments. That document received not a few comments, that document received hundreds of comments. So we have spent a better part of a good 2 months or more going through all of those documents, all of those comments, making revisions, making updates where we thought that the science supported the updates, etc. In my opinion, I think we've got a real good product that we are going to be taking to public notice here in mid-December also, just like the other one. But the big piece that I wanted to talk about, because I know this has had interest in this group as well as other groups across the Commonwealth, is solar panel arrays. Earlier this year, the agency put out two guidance memorandums to the design community regarding solar. It had to deal with treating solar panels as unconnected impervious areas or unconnected impervious cover. And the more recent memo, which was the one that came out in mid-April, explained the process to do that, but then also said that subsequent agency guidance documentation would follow. That would speak to when and how that was to be implemented, and that's what this section of the guidance document does. So section 5.50. So the big things in that particular section that I think have a lot of interest of parties all across the Commonwealth are that solar panels are to be considered unconnected impervious area, unless an interconnection agreement, and I'll talk more about interconnection agreement or interconnection approval, is obtained by December 31st of 2024. So when folks have asked a lot, where did the December 31st, 2024 date come from? That's actually tied to a piece of legislation from this past General Assembly session, which was House Bill 206, which speaks to small solar projects and the need for mitigation and looking at the loss of forest cover and for prime ag lands. That has an implementation date of December 31st or January 1 of 2025 in it. So that's where the December 31st, 2024 date came from. And if folks want to know more about small solar projects, the mitigation, et cetera, forest lands, prime farmlands, et cetera, the agency was directed to have a stakeholder advisory group. We did that. Report was produced, submitted to General Assembly as well as the governor's office. I want to say December 1st, so last week. So that's actually posted and up on the register's information system now. So the big thing is, like I said, unconnected impervious areas. Solar panels are considered unconnected impervious areas. And the other thing too, the more important piece is, and I think this is the piece that a lot of the design professionals miss out with this particular one is that it doesn't apply if your solar panel is directly connected to the storm sewer system, which basically means like, you are adjacent to a receiving stream, you're immediately adjacent to a storm sewer system, whether that be a ditch, a pipe, an inlet, etc. Then you're considered connected. So I'll talk more about that concept here in a second. Next slide. So just a little bit more before I get into some of that nitty-gritty nuts and bolts engineering type stuff. Interconnection approval. A lot of folks have asked, okay, how do I know whether or not I have interconnection approval? Whether or not I have to do or not have to look at this, on or after January 1 of 2025. So that guidance document lays out a number of ways that which interconnection approval can be demonstrated. One of them is the issuance of what they call a system impact study by PJM. PJM is basically the regional transmission organization here in this area that basically approves connections to the grid, et cetera. So, if an entity, were to have a system impact study before December 31st of 2024, then, they wouldn't have to follow the memo in this section of the guidance, but it doesn't mean that they don't have to do stormwater management and erosion and sediment control. Second pathway is an equivalent study issued by PJM. That's in there right now because PJM is actually going through a reform process with the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. They are looking at amending their particular process, so they may not be using a system impact study going forward. They may be using something else, but we needed a placeholder to recognize that that process is going on. PJM has also, indicated, and this has been in the news a little bit too, that they were looking at basically establishing a moratorium of new submissions for about a period of 2 years. They were so backed up. So so stay tuned on that particular piece. We're watching that to see what's going to happen. For these smaller projects, the ones that don't go through PJM, but they go through the state interconnection process, Those get issued what they call a small generator interconnection agreement. So like if you've got a small generator interconnection agreement, you know, on or before December 31st of 2024, you don't have to comply with the provisions of 5.5, but you still have to do stormwater and you still have to do EMS. And then the last one is, you know, submission, and the more important piece is the acceptance of the interconnection service request application to a regional organization or to electric utility. So that right there is basically the first step in the process. Whether it's PJM or whether it goes through the state interconnection process, like an application submittal is like the first part, but the more important piece about that is acceptance. Like I said, PJM has indicated that you know, they'll most likely, if things continue to progress like they have been, they may not be accepting new applications, you know, for a period of like 2+ years. So stay tuned. Next slide, and I'll talk a little bit more about this. So what is the concept of unconnected impervious area? What does that mean? A lot of folks have asked that question, trying to understand that at the end of the day. The one thing I will tell you as an engineer, this concept of unconnected impervious area, a lot of folks, you know, really said, hey, this is something new. We hadn't heard about this, etc. Unconnected impervious area and that concept as it relates to stormwater management has been around for decades. And when I say decades, I mean decades. Like I can take you back to manuals that, you know, are just as old as me that have this concept in here. So it's not a new concept. But basically a way to think of unconnected impervious area is, I've got this picture of a solar panel. So basically rain falls on the solar panel, right? That's an impervious surface. Rain can't mitigate, you know, can't move through that. So it runs off the solar panel and then it falls onto a pervious surface, grass, meadow, etc. underneath of it. And then that rainfall moves along that pervious surface, you know, infiltrate into the ground, etc. And then the remaining runoff then runs into a stormwater conveyance system. That's what an unconnected impervious area is. So, you know, the memo that came out in March and then the subsequent one that came out in April basically just solidify a concept that has been in place at least since 1986. So, and the big thing is it only applies to the horizontal projected area. So that would be that dashed area. You can see there's a big nasty engineering equation that's down there. Don't worry about the nasty engineering equation that's down there. But basically it deals with as the area, the dash line basically hits the ground. That is the area that would be considered impervious for the purposes of doing stormwater management calculations. Next slide. So just a little bit more about that. You know, we've talked a little bit about the nasty engineering equation, not a new concept. The other things that are on this page are not new concepts either for the engineers that are doing this work at the end of the day. One of the things like bullet item number or the first bullet that's up there, you know, the runoff curve number or CN. And curve number is basically a way of thinking of basically in your mind how much rainfall actually results in runoff from a piece of property. The higher the curve number, the higher the amount of runoff that occurs. So an impervious surface has a number of 98. Think of it in terms of 98% of what rain hits an impervious surface, whether it's a roof or a parking lot or a solar panel, at some point is going to show up as runoff into a receiving stream at some point or another. But to account for that unconnectedness, you know, which is that rainfall running across that pervious land, infiltrating, you know, transpiration, groundwater recharge, all of that stuff that happens, there is a means of adjusting that 98 to a lower number to account for all those scientific processes that occur. So to recognize that in that section of the guidance memo, we put that process in there. It's an established process. Like I said, it's been around for many decades. We put that in there. We said, hey, engineers, we basically want you to follow this process. We understand you don't like considering it in an impervious area, but we recognize that it's unconnected and we're going to give you the ability to adjust based upon the pathway, that already been established. So, and there are actually two different pathways we have in there. The NRCS method, Natural Resource Conservation Service, previously the SCS. That's been around, like I said, for almost 4 decades now, or more than 4 decades now. So that's not a new method. VRRM just stands for the Virginia Runoff Reduction Method. That is a Virginia specific method that we've had that has been in place since 2014, July 2014. We have a method for accounting for unconnected impervious in there. We've given folks the option. You can either choose one or the other. Both of them we feel are acceptable, scientifically defensible, etc. A lot of work and research has been done to establish both of those. One of the more important things though on this slide is site compaction. So I don't know how many folks in the room have actually seen some of these solar facilities constructed. They can vary widely. One of the ones where DEQ is the stormwater authority, predominantly in Southside Virginia, we are seeing a lot of earth moving occurring to be able to construct these things. And a lot of that has to deal with the need for flatter slopes, so they can lay the solar panels out so then they don't shade out one another as they track and stuff like that. You don't want the top of one panel, not allowing them to hit the bottom of the one behind it, based upon the sun angle and the operating angle of the panel itself. But to do that, there's a significant amount of cutting, filling, compaction, etc. that's happening to be able to get there. Well, what does that do? That basically, for all practical purposes, a freshly graded construction site, that has had cut and fill that's happened on, has had, a vibratory roller, a sheet foot roller, or a vibratory roller over top of it. That basically generates a curve number of not 98 but 95. It's almost like having a parking lot out there. So, one of the other things that we had to do was to set the pathway by which we wanted folks to be able to take into account the cutting, filling, and compaction that was occurring at these particular projects, and to account and adjust for the post-construction stormwater management plans for that concept. There are a couple of different ways that you can do that. It's not, like I said, just like unconnected impervious area. It's not a new concept. NRCS, technical release 55, been around since June of 1986. Just like unconnected impervious area and that curve number adjustment, there's a separate process for those folks to adjust the curve number to take into account site compaction, etc. So we've given the engineer 3 different pathways to be able to account and adjust for that. Both of them have historically been used. They've been around. They're based in science, etc. So we've included that in the solar panel area, but that also applies to land development across the whole. So not only will that apply to solar panel projects for solar projects, that's written in that design guide to a plan to all land development activities, because it's a concept that applies to all. And then the other thing that we've done is alternatively, if a development company can go through the process and actually implement site decompaction. And we do have an existing specification that's been around since July 2014, which is specification number 4. Have a process by which folks can go through and decompact their project, before achieving final stabilization. So, before planning or sodding or mulching, etc. They can go through and implement decompaction measures to assist with reestablishing the natural hydrology of the ground surface. So, reestablishing those infiltration rates, etc., that initial extraction, etc. Like I said, we have a specification for that. We've had that specification for almost a decade now. We put that in the preferred pathway. That's what we want to do. We also have an alternative for a DEQ approved decompaction plan. The agency is working through a process by which we are undertaking an effort. Like I said, we took that 2.5 feet of paper and boiled that down into like 60 pages. We are looking at that stack of 2.5 paper, which is a whole slew of manuals and specifications and stuff. And we have a separate project that is occurring that will take all that and boil that down into a new stormwater manual for folks to use across the Commonwealth. So we left the door open for that because we've been working very heavily with Dr. Lee Daniels at Virginia Tech, who is an extremely intelligent soils guy and knows all about soils and decompaction and acid sulfate soils up in the Spotsylvania area and everything else. So we wanted to leave that avenue open for us to have that pathway if we were able to work with Dr. Daniels to come up with an acceptable pathway forward. Next slide. So where are we with that document? Just like I said with 22-2011, we are set to re-advertise that December 19th through January 18th. In the Virginia Register, and then we have a tentative effective date of January 1st or January 19th of 2023. So we are aiming to have both of those documents effective, mid-January of this coming year for design professionals to use, not only to make it much clearer and much more concise about how to develop their plans, but then also offer an avenue by which if they were to follow that, and they were to get their plans pre-reviewed by a certified individual that can make the training and certification, that then they can turn that in the checklist into the agency. And, if we choose to, we can, basically look at that and say, okay, we are going to approve this. And based upon the professional and the third party looking at it and saying, it's good to go. And, we issue approval and issue construction permit coverage. Next slide. I just got a couple of programmatic updates here, just real quick too. These are roles of interest also. So just two quick things. And then I'll have another stopping point for questions, etc. The agency does have a new stormwater management program director. Her name is Becky Brochet. Becky's contact information is up there. So if you have any questions related to stormwater, ENS, etc., you're always more than welcome to call me, but you can always call Becky. She came from us in late September from Chesterfield County, where she managed the county's stormwater and ENS plan review and approval program, etc. She spent time working at local government in Hanover and was also a design consultant too. So she brings definitely a perspective of both sides, but there's Becky's contact information. And one of the other things that we were able to do, and I worked for about a decade to get this done, was to actually have underneath Becky a plan review program manager. So I did this for a number of years. I was the program manager and had all of the plan reviewers reporting to me. Made it pretty much impossible to get anything done. Short of coming and presenting to Ellen a number of times. But April Rhodes is in that position. She comes to us from our Northern Regional Office. She has a good number of years of doing program review or plan review, as well as program review, as well as personnel management in the Northern Office. So April is kind of like our point person when it comes to plan review questions, etc. And April's contact information is up there. Like I said, you can contact me, Becky, or April. Any one of the three of us can help you. And then at that point, next slide just says questions. Actually, I take that back. One other thing. And I thought this was a good, at least a good thing, knowing that some members of the commission, represent local governments in which DEQ is the stormwater authority, predominantly Middle Peninsula and Northern Neck. Some folks up in Orange, etc., Culpeper. The agency, just due to the resources that we have, the personnel that we have to do plan review and approval, etc. One of the things that we were running into was if we had a ton of work that's coming into us from Northern Virginia, state and federal, a bunch of work that's coming in the Piedmont Regional Office, which is a lot of our opt-outs. And then, and an additional workload that was coming in the Tidewater Regional Office, which was all of our other federal facilities. We just can't pick people up and move them from regional office to like distribute the personnel to match the workload. So basically what we've done is we picked the workload up and distributed it across the personnel. So we didn't want a plan reviewer in the Piedmont office trying to look at 40 plans while a colleague or a counterpart, say like in our Valley office, was looking at 10. So we've gone through and implemented the one DEQ stormwater and ENS plan review concept. April is the plan review program manager, is the point person for that particular project. Centralized plan submission. So if you developer, you're turning something into the agency, whether it be for a state, federal, or private project. Centralized plan review, one location in which you turn in your plans, you turn in your checklist, you turn in everything. The plan review at deq.virginia.gov. That comes in, April's team looks at that and says, okay, who's the next person on deck to take that plan? It may be a person located in that regional office where the project is, but it may be someone that's in another regional office. And we've been doing this for a handful of months now. It's starting to work pretty well. We're starting to get this process down. So basically, another way of looking at it is plan review without regional office borders. So don't be surprised, like, if you're involved in the loop somehow or another, and, a comment letter comes and like it has like a regional office that may be like Southwest Avenue. But we did that. So we have equitable distribution of workload among all of the staff. But more importantly is reducing plan review processing times. So in addition to the first guidance memo, streamlined plan review 22/2011, we're also doing one DEQ plan review, both under this mindset of significantly reducing our plan review processing times. And with that, I'm going to say next slide, which says questions, and stop there.
Are there any questions, comments? Ronnie?
Drew, once this guidance goes into effect, what is the penalties for violation?
You mean like if someone doesn't comply? I mean, I can tell you what the penalties are in the regulation. Like if the agency were to undertake like an enforcement action, like if it's a project that's covered underneath the Clean Water Act, so a large land disturbing activity, an acre or greater, penalties there have a cap of $32,500 per day per violation.
One other question, do you see, this is a general question, do you see a reduction in new solar projects coming forward?
That's a very good question. And I got an email while I was sitting here waiting to present and we had this concept it's actually in the budget bill, which is expedited plan review, which basically someone can come to the agency for a project that's 100 acres or greater and say, we want you to do this in a much shorter time frame, not in 60 days. We want you to do this in 45 and we'll pay you $30,000 to do it all. I want to say like that list was like 10 projects last year, where like the previous year, like it was substantially greater. So I was really surprised when I saw that, but that also started to confirm my suspicions, which is the number of projects that we were starting to see, for solar, have started to dwindle, at least over 20, calendar year 2022.
Yeah.
So, I haven't seen a whole ton of new stuff that has come in. My suspicion is if it still is, it's smaller projects. So that's a good question.
Yeah, I've been seeing the same thing, I think. So,
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anything new in Essex. And I'm starting to think like, Richmond County, like I haven't seen anything new there. King Queen, nothing new there. So yeah, it definitely like 2022 is not like, 19 and 20 in the first half of 21.
Any other questions or comments? Yes.
Mr. Blackwell.
Drew,
Yes, sir.
in determining the impervious area, I've seen these panels where they're flat.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, you're taking stated would be,
Zero.
so it's just something to balance.
That's right, lane times of it.
Yeah, it doesn't, you don't adjust that whether the towns, when you do.
So we've told them they have to give us a minimum operating. unit. So if they will operate at, zero at some point, then the area they have to use is the area of the panel. So,
Not all these solar facilities operated like that.
correct.
Panels
We
do not rotate to the
yeah, I mean, we've had some folks that said, and this is the other interesting thing that we learned about solar. So one of the other things in that section, and I didn't mention this in the presentation, but one of the other things that we did is we gave folks the opportunity that if during a storm event that they can rotate their panels straight up and down, then they can treat that as, no impervious cover. And there are some companies that have indicated that they already have technologies in place to do that because they rotate their panels flat during windstorms and they rotate their panels vertically during hail and sleet storms. So some companies have already implemented the technology to be able to do some of that. Most of them will tell you though that they can't rotate basically vertical or near vertical. They have like some operating angle that they have to be at for them to be able to generate the energy necessary to make the project go forward. So but it's all across the board. I'd love to be able to tell you that the industry is standardized. I even had a question about a month ago about fixed solar panels. So I know that there's some project, it's not in a DEQ jurisdiction, but another jurisdiction where we aren't the authority for someone that's looking at doing a fixed panel project, which I thought we were past, past that. And I see some panels that are, the panel may be the size of this table here. It's short and small. And then some of them would be where the panel is 10 feet wide by like, 40 or 50 feet long. They're, it just all just kind of depends upon where you are geographically and what they're trying to achieve.
Any other questions or comments?
I have one question. Do you think we're getting to the point where the regs and requirements are going to at least minimize, if not eliminate, stormwater leaving the site? And one of the problems we've had in neighboring property primarily end up sort of holding the bag, if you will.
That is a very good question. And I think you mean it in context of if I'm a downstream property owner, right?
Primarily.
Yeah. So
But it doesn't have to be adjacent.
correct. One of those things that we've done in this guidance document is make it very clear that if you're proposing a discharge off your site, like we expect you to control it, number one. We expect you to control it in accordance with the regs, number two. And what we really actually do and push you towards is, I mentioned this term, the Virginia runoff reduction method. We want you to implement that, to the fullest extent that you can, which that operates under the concept of no matter what your development scenario is, that when the water leaves the site, it basically mimics what was there prior to construction to the extent practical. So this concept of, just increase it and find somewhere to send it, we're well past that concept. One of the bigger things that we struggle with, and this happens in any land development project, but solar just exacerbates it, is in some ways it is much easier for those entities to just lease more forested area, right? Let's put a massive buffer around the project and basically try to eliminate the need for those runoff producing best management practices. So, so a good part of that document is to push folks to actually implement runoff reduction how it was truly intended, which was put in those BMPs that basically, infiltrate where you can infiltrate, other types of concepts like that of getting that site, even though it's been developed, back to this concept of basically no net increase.
Is that monitored or is the new process called for an active monitoring of that? Is that the other problem?
We don't have post-construction monitoring. in the state's program, at this particular point. So unfortunately, we don't have that, but in some ways that we do. And that goes to, as these things start to finish and stabilize, et cetera. And this is what led to, those memos from March and April of last year, which is the monitoring was the citizen monitoring, which was the complaints, which was like, hey, this isn't working, what's the issue here? What are we missing? What are we not seeing, et cetera. So, the other thing I would, point out, too, is, and we did hear a lot from the solar industry, this is new, there are adverse impacts as a result of this change in policy, but I did talk a little bit about, a newly constructed, or a newly constructed construction site, denuded but compacted, et cetera, and that runoff curve number being 95, right? These entities, as they're building these things, are putting in these stormwater basins to control for erosion and sediment control. They're sizing those basins to use that curve number of 95. Like that's how they have to do it. So a lot of times when we see these things, and one of the questions we've asked when we see these plans, we see these big, huge, massive basins, that are there in the post-construction case, and they were built to handle during construction. So what we've been asking them to do is, okay, retrofit that basin so you can get some runoff reduction. So, you're not just trying to this old paradigm of basically shade your peak. You've got this large volume of water that's just being discharged over many, many, many days, where it would only happen for 12 hours previously.
Drew, thank you for your time today. Appreciate the presentation. A lot of good information there for us to get back to our communities. Recently joining us since the first presentation, Ronnie Gill from Essex County, welcome. And online, Senator Guzman, welcome. Delegate Guzman.
Thank you.
I was promoting you. So we'll move on to our next presentation, update on the Healthy Watershed Forest. Terry Lasher and Chandler Voorhees. I believe y'all are online today.
It's virtual.
Welcome. Thank you.
Oh, well, welcome welcome. Thank you for the welcome and for having us come today. We greatly appreciate it. Just so happened that our offices are relatively close to each other, so it made more sense with busy schedules to come and kind of combine efforts today to update the commission on what it is that we've been up to. So on the front of the Healthy Watershed Forest project, really what we've been doing is a lot of support building, some foundational pieces that really needed to occur in order to substantiate the effort. So as a result of that, some things that came out of the last General Assembly session was a New Kent nursery expansion. We got about $2 million over the next 2 years to expand our production there. We realized that not only to achieve some of the requirements of WIP 3, which is going to require approximately 41 million trees, if we're going to do anything to do some afforestation and carbon sequestration projects, we also needed to have a good seedling base for that as well. So an expansion of a nursery that was in production at one time but has been out of production for the past couple of decades is certainly something that is welcome on behalf of the department. So we thank anyone there that is a representative of the General Assembly for assisting us in getting that funding stream. We've also held 2 different carbon education events. One was at the Virginia Forestry Summit that focused on practitioners to educate them on the different market availabilities of carbon, not only in the Commonwealth, but around the country. And then one in June of last year in Stanton, which was basically open to anybody who wanted to come to learn about different carbon options. We invited folks from around the country, different carbon program management companies. Our own Chandler Van Voorhees was there with Acre Investments and gave the opening talk at that symposium. But we also had Finite Carbon, NCX, Blue Source, the American Forest Foundation, Vera, which is one of the accreditation pieces, and it was well attended. Over 100 people came to that. So now people are well versed in the different carbon markets and the different options that they have to access that market. There is another carbon symposium, this time being hosted primarily by Virginia Tech Extension and co-hosted by the Department of Forestry, which will be in March. The exact date I don't believe has been settled quite yet, but March 2023 in Richmond. And then, of course, without having forest land, we don't have any forest, or having any ag land, we don't develop any forest. So the Forest Sustainability Fund, which is really an enticement for localities to retain forest land use. That sustainability fund contributed about $1 million this year to localities to offset losses that they get from having or participating in the land use program. So we're looking for that program to potentially expand. We don't know quite yet what's going to happen as far as budgets, but that's where we stand as far as the Department of Forestry's update regarding healthy watershed forests. And with that, I will turn it over to Chandler.
Sure, thanks. Actually, fascinating discussion on what's going on with the solar stuff. And one thing that we've been watching is in the IRA bill, instead of the financing for solar to receive investment tax credits of equivalent to 30% of the project, they've now expanded that to a 30% cash grant, which will enable nonprofits to start participate. So I would anticipate seeing lots and lots of smaller projects as these nonprofits, whether they're churches, schools, foundations, you name it, start to look at solar. So just something to keep on the horizon. I think Terry's exactly right. Since our last update, we've really been focusing on laying a lot of foundation stuff from a market. I'll start with the market piece, and then I'll get into some specific foundations. But the market is really significantly growing leaps and bounds. You're seeing lots of institutional players continue to pile into this market. The amount of demand out there is almost staggering to even contemplate at this point. But probably the most fundamental thing that's going on as it relates to trees and components of this is that the market is really bifurcated between what is a nature-based reduction. And so think of an existing timber stand as a reduction, and what's a nature-based removal, which is more like reforestation. And the price differential is significant. It's 3 to 4x difference between that. But there is some organizing of the market, specifically in terms of laying foundations as it relates to the Healthy Forest initiative. Our company's been engaged in a first ever auction with the Intercontinental Exchange out of London. And the ICE Exchange owns the New York Stock Exchange, among other exchanges. ICE is where a lot of the Brent crude is traded until LIBOR situation. It used to be where LIBOR was traded. But a lot of people don't realize that 18 billion carbon allowances last year were traded on the ICE Exchange for a notional value of $1 trillion. In August, we helped them launch the first ever futures contract for nature-based credits. Those go out to 2030. And we were proud to be a part of that effort because that is going to help move this market forward. But specifically, we're doing the first ever auction for nature-based removals on ICE, or nature-based credits, period. And currently engaged in a roadshow. This auction will be early part of next year. We're in the process of onboarding everything from trading houses to in Japan to hedge funds to companies, all that are going to be competing to purchase. We put up 500,000 tons of carbon credits. Specifically, in addition to that, we just launched and announced last week, and this pertains to Virginia landowners, a forward contract with Enviva, which is the big pellet manufacturer or supplier into the market. We are proud to have a 9-year partnership that will deliver 90,000 tons of carbon credits to them over that period. And again, this is indicative of what we're seeing. We have another Ford contract as it pertains to Virginia that was 160,000 tons. So we're going out, making sure that we get the infrastructure in place with ICE and the ability to auction these credits. We've got Ford contracts to add some stability. So it's a mixture of spot and forwards that are going on. We've brought on Andrew Richards, who is joining us today. Andrew is in charge of enrolling lands in Virginia and also engaging with county EDAs to begin those onboarding discussions. We're super excited. We've signed up the first handful of landowners. We're continuing to have a pretty robust pipeline and welcome, obviously, having further discussions with anybody that has interest in doing some bottomland hardwood reforestation. Yeah, we anticipate this in the next 6 months to really start to really ramp up this onboarding of the EDAs and to get that component going. We think this is significant. Everything that has happened on the New Kent facility is very germane to this, because while the Department of Forestry produces a lot of trees, a lot of them are pine trees, and these carbon markets really require hardwoods. And historically, that's been around 900,000 plus or minus, give or take, trees. And to give you an idea, 10,000 acres is 6 million trees. And every 10,000 acres we put in the ground is going to be 6 million trees. Just to remind you, Green Trees as a project, our land started primarily in Arkansas, Louisiana, and Mississippi. And we have 134,000 acres that is in that project right now. And obviously we're expanding into Virginia to very much bolster that. But we sent down about a little over a month ago through spot sales, just north of $8.2 million to landowners, which accounted for about $61 an acre in spot sales so far, and in just this year. And so what you're starting to see is meaningful dollars that are hitting the landowners. We're looking forward to writing similar checks and bigger checks to Virginia landowners. But it has been, this past several months really has been focusing in on putting in all the foundational components to enable the scale, whether it's getting the New Kent facility, Ford contracts, the ICE auction, bringing in Andrew, doing some stuff on the quantification side of things. So we're super excited. It's taken longer than we anticipated, but COVID certainly interrupted some of that. But I think we're poised for a very strong 2023. And that's what I have for as far as an update.
Any questions, comments?
If nobody else does. Hey, Chandler, go back to we're talking about the $8 million distributed to landowners recently, working out to $61 per acre. How many of those were in Virginia, and what part of Virginia?
So that wasn't Virginia yet. We're planting we actually just signed this fall our first acres in Virginia. So we're planting lands this year. The next distribution will include those landowners. So that wasn't in Virginia, but next year definitely will include Virginia landowners. That's for sure.
Your work right now with Virginia landowners are in which jurisdictions?
We have 2 projects in Fauquier County and another project in Shenandoah County, but we're operating out of the whole state of Virginia to work with landowners.
Okay, you got some. I'm looking at some folks from Essex and Orange who are anxious for you to find a land over there.
Yeah, no, and getting in touch with Andrew and having those conversations and really accelerating. We finalized a lot of the landowner contract and packages kind of late summer, and then had some early conversations going on with some landowners. We have, if there's some that want to kind of sneak in this year, we always got some we'll do what we can to get and procure more volume to plant. And also we're starting to look to next year. We think we're getting the flag in the ground this year. But we really need to scale the contract that I mentioned, not the Inviva one, but the other one. It's going to require us, that one that's specific to Virginia is going to require us to get about at least 10,000 acres in the ground at some point in time. How quickly we get there, we'd rather get there sooner rather than later. But again, it's a function of we have to have 6 million trees, and so this is where this nursery situation we're trying to work through is very germane to that. So you can only plant with the material that you get. So, and this isn't just a problem in Virginia. This is actually a problem throughout the entire Southeast. And there's a bill in the House. And now that it's Representative Bentz, who's a Republican from Oregon, was the lead sponsor of it, called SOS for Seedlings Act. I worked with both Bentz and primarily Representative Westerman, who's from Arkansas, to get that bill at least drafted and put in. And that bill, the design of that is really to help public and private nurseries scale up. And the way it's conceived is that it's a $1 billion low interest loan program amortized out over 20 years. And given the change of leadership in the House, I hope that bill starts to see light of the day. But because it's certainly something that's needed. There's only 25 million hardwoods in production in nurseries, public or private, in the U.S. South, which is arguably the country's greatest tree growing region, and really need to put a zero behind that. And so these are the headache issues and scaling that we've been trying to noodle through, and they don't happen by flicking a switch. It takes time to collect seed and grow that into the nursery operation, and there's lots of labor issues that are also intermingled into that.
Chandler, how are landowners being notified or finding out about the program and how they can get involved?
Right now, we've been doing some digital marketing. We are in the process of doing some direct mail, but we really, the best way to do it is, and I'd love to hear if there's any opportunities to get Andrew and myself in front of them. It really is the best is to kind of have lunch and learns, meet and greets, whatever you want to call them, where we can sit down face to face and really go through the pros and the cons. There's nothing there's no silver bullet in anything. This is just an option, and you got to be comfortable with duration. You got to be comfortable making that land use change on your property. But our best marketing is happy landowners at the end of the day. But as we start to build that track record here in Virginia, we have a 20-year track record in the Delta. But as we build it here, we really would welcome the opportunity to come to the counties and have those conversations.
Would our soil and water districts be a good avenue for some of those conversations, perhaps?
You can get local farm bureaus as well.
Yeah.
Farm bureaus and farm credit.
Yep.
Yeah.
I
I recently attended it's ongoing, I guess, until noon today. The Virginia Association of Soil and Water Conservation Districts annual meeting was in Roanoke this weekend. So there were some conversations had there as well.
Any other questions or comments?
And just to note, our Farm Bureau rep who was sitting in the room had to leave, but he's actually online and listening. And so hopefully you got your message.
Perfect.
We can do the connect if we need to.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All righty, moving on to our next presentation, Community Flood Preparation Fund Grant Opportunities. Madison.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all so much for having me. It's nice to see all y'all's faces in person. Love the opportunity to present front of y'all this afternoon. While I did my presentation, I believe y'all also have it printed in front of you. Once again, I'm Madison Tier with Wetlands Watch. We are an environmental nonprofit organization based in Norfolk, Virginia. We work statewide to help localities prepare and address and plan for their local flood risk at a community scale. And today I'm talking about the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, which is a statewide resource for localities hoping to build capacity, study, and implement projects to address their local flood risk. So you can hit the next slide. Okay. Great. So we could just go to the first bullet for me. Thanks. So this is just a quick overview of the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. So Virginia, the way that we get the revenue for this Community Flood Preparedness Fund, or the CFPF for short, is through the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, or commonly referred to as RGGI. We get 45% of those revenues through those RGGI auctions that happen quarterly to the Community Flood Preparedness Fund. Next bullet, please. So far, since those auctions have started, once again, they're quarterly. The CFPF has received just over $200 million. And if you go to the next bullet, the last auction for this year is actually today. So we'll know by Friday how much more money will be going into the fund. But we estimate that it'll be around $30 to $40 million because that's how much each round tends to bring in. And there's a typo on that slide, just so I know, it says 35,000, it's supposed to be 35 million, a couple more zeros. And then the next bullet, please. So the Department of Conservation and Recreation administers this fund. There has been 3 grant rounds thus far. The first 2 happening last year, and then 1 happening at the beginning of this year. And through those, over the course of those 3 rounds, so far, just around $45 million has been given to localities statewide. Next bullet, please. So there is more money to be given out during round 3. So for those who may not know, round 3 was announced in September. About $14 million was announced for community, but then another 30 applications that were put in during round 3 were given the opportunity to resubmit their applications for a supplemental review period. So we should know by sometime around the end of this year if they get approved or denied. But what's important here is that $56 million more is still available for those 30 applications, and we'll get into how that money works out in just a minute. But you can go to the next slide for me, please. And so a little bit more about what this resource funds. So there are 3 grant categories. There are planning, capacity building, studies, and projects. Planning capacity building really encompasses local resilience plans, additional staff localities may need, and training for staff, such as certified floodplain management certification. Those studies are better for localities to better understand their unique flood risk, whether it's just on a neighborhood level to a complete region level, such as a PDC. And then once again, the last one is projects. And the important piece here is that localities cannot apply for project funds unless they have at least an approved local resilience plan. So this is the state really trying to get communities to think about forward-looking flood planning, to make sure that those projects aren't only being implemented to help neighborhoods and communities now, but also in the future as the flood risk may get worse. Round 4, the next round of the Community Flood Preparedness Fund is anticipated to open in 2023. We have been told by DCR staff to expect the next grant manual to open around March, April time period. So that gives localities now plenty of time to start preparing to put an application for this. One big asterisk on this is that the next grant round will have a new grant manual written by DCR. We have not seen a draft of what that grant manual will be just yet. So just know that the way that the categories are organized and the requirements within each of them may move around a little bit. It will be open for public comment for at least 30 days, beginning somewhere once again around March, April time period. So it will still give communities plenty of time to prepare with their applications. Next slide, please. So this is a bit of a breakdown of where that money has come across on each round. Really, what I want to point out is that the Community Flood Preparedness Fund is obviously a very needed resource for Virginia, as for each grant round. It's primarily the third one. The amount requested has drastically superseded the amount released. So for the third grant round, $40 million was made available for localities, but $93 million was applied for. And then again, in round two, there was $17 million available, and almost $30 million was applied for. So that just kind of sums up the amount that were given throughout those three grant rounds. And just to back up a little bit, the applicants rather, who are eligible to apply for these funds are not only localities on the town and county level and city level, but also planning district commissions and soil and water conservation districts. You can go to the next slide. This is a map of the geographic disbursement of the awards so far. We really want to emphasize that this is a statewide. This is a statewide fund. There is a misconception in some areas it's only a coastal fund because a majority of that funding thus far has gone to the Hampton Roads coastal area, as you can see on this map here. But if you go to the next slide, we want to emphasize that a lot of Western communities and Central Virginia communities have already taken advantage of this fund in a multitude of different ways. So if you click on the next three bullets for me. So Henrico County, for instance, has gotten around $360,000 to prepare and draft out a pilot voluntary property acquisition project in their region to try and reduce the development in areas where we know the flood risk is really high. The Central Virginia Planning District Commission has gotten funds for a regional flood resilience plan, which is really beneficial for counties, towns, and cities in that region, because even though the plan is on the planning district commission level, all of the localities in that region will be able to use that plan as their requirement to access and unlock those project funds. And then finally, another example, the town of Scottsville was awarded around $120,000 for a flood study. They're studying a very small part of their downtown areas that are within that flood, so they can survey their levee systems. Next slide, please. So awards made in this region, I figured that y'all would want to know that. So round one, the Middle Peninsula PDC was awarded just over $26,000 for the design permitting of the program. You can click on the next bullets for this slide. There should be two more. The Middle Peninsula PDC received also $35,000 in round two for capacity building. This was to bolster their GIS capabilities and flood data on their private flood website. The Northern Neck Planning District Commission was also awarded $25,000 for their update of their hazard mitigation plan. And then the town of Tappahannock was awarded $70,000 from Boston Creek and our community river project. So this area is getting really good money. Go the next slide, please. Round three awards. There were two from this region, and then you can go ahead and click on the next slide. The next two, there should be one more. Thank you so much. Albemarle County received $120,000 for its resilience plan, and then King George County also received money for its resilience plan of $30,000. If you remember earlier, I was talking about the supplemental review period. There was about 30 applications that got sent for supplemental review. And the one in the region I got that was the Rappahannock Regional Commission. They also put in money for the slants plan. Just for background, each application was given different criteria for our review period. I'm not sure why this one was, because the majority of resilience plans do get approved because DCR does understand that is the barrier or the unlocking step, if you will, to get into that project implementation fund category. But I would imagine that as long as they submitted everything that DCR asked of them, they'll see it favorably. So the main reason why I wanted to come here today and what I've been asked to do is talk about future opportunities for this region to access these funds. So the city of Fredericksburg and Stafford County, I've been told, have existing pilot projects for river level gauge monitoring for flooding. And so these two communities can access the project once to expand upon that effort, maybe make it a regional wide effort. I spoke with Delegate Bell's aid last week, and she had talked about potentially, asking Green County if they'd be interested in a flood study, because they knew, they know that that is something that they tried to get funding for in the past, so this might be a pathway for that. And then finally, just wanting to emphasize again that it may be beneficial for the PDC that do not have a regional flood resilience plan so far, to maybe pursue funds for that. So it will unlock those project implementation funds for those localities within those regions, because really this is the only statewide fund, and that's not from federal dollars. That localities can access. It doesn't require a super extensive application period, and it's for pre-disaster flood risk plans. So with that, oh, one more thing, sorry. So Wetlands Watch staff has been helping communities across the state apply for these funds, providing technical assistance, putting together documents, helping them access flood data, kind of streamline that application process for communities, because they know that grant writing is not necessarily anyone's favorite activity to do, but obviously accessing these funds is very important. We have a variety of different resources that we've prepared. Mainly, we've emphasized helping communities access those capacity building grants, because that's where we see the entry level for most of the people applying, and trying to get that resilience plan, trying to get more staff, training on the local level. So we've really emphasized a lot of videos on that. And I can say this is hyperlinked to the Basin, so you can click on any of these, they're just PDFs, but I'm more than happy to send copies to anyone that would like to request them. And the next slide is questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments?
I have a comment. The reason the Northern Net Planning Commission applied for that funding to modify its hazard mitigation plan to also a resilience plan, we identified in our 2016 update the need to be more proactive instead of reactive. And with these things, a lot more money is spent in post-disaster than it is pre-disaster. So we're in the process through this next update of incorporating resilience components that, when adopted, all 10 localities in the Northern Net will have a resilience plan in place and should be able to go after this next round of funding for implementation. That's what they really need. We have 4+ implementation projects, equaling roughly $3 million in Rappahannock communities in the Northern Net, and they're just chomping at the bit to get those projects done. And they've been in the pipeline for years now. They just never had the capital to do it. So just a background on why we applied.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Questions here, Kevin?
Is there any way to use these funds for transportation projects, or where we have? Well, I still have 4 in my county. And when it floods, it can't get through. I know in Orange County, Mr. White has Ellisville Flats. When it rains, 4 inch can't get through. So, is there any way of being able to raise some bridges or do any thing with that?
No funds have been used for that purpose as of yet. I wouldn't say that they would necessarily prioritize raising bridges, but if the project would address what's causing that flooding, whether there needs to be like better channels or stormwater drainage systems, and if the bridge elevation was part of that overall project, that might be something that's eligible. But if we want to discuss it more, we have connections with DCR staff to ask those kinds of questions. I can certainly give you my phone and see if that's something that they would consider.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Senator?
Comment, I heard Madison's presentation down in Norfolk to the meeting that's at the Senate, one of the Senate committees I served on. And I mentioned that to a group, I guess Brent was there. And at any rate, that it seemed like it would be a good fit for the Rappahannock River Basin Commission to coordinate the efforts of all the member localities for an ongoing project to have with river monitoring and other things that, because the money is there. And the thing that caught my attention, which was in Norfolk, saying, hey, this is for the whole state. Of course, they're using a lot of it down out of this area, but I think it would should be a no-brainer if you got a grant application from this group for her to say, yeah, a couple $1 million. So I think we follow up on that.
And when it's talking about prepare that application, we have the resources to do that. So
May I make
a comment from online?
Yes, go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Kurt Smith. I'm the Deputy Director of the Middle Peninsula PDC. I'm sorry I can't be there in person today, but I just wanted to chime in and share some additional information with our experiences with the flood fund. One of the primary things Ms. Teeter's presentation overlooked was the projects that have not been funded so far in the previous rounds of the flood fund. We've submitted upwards to 90 grant applications to the fund, and a couple of them were noted that were awarded. And I just wanted to point out that the majority of applications we've submitted have been for projects on private property, which are eligible per the grant manual. And when you look at the Rappahannock watershed, the majority of resilience needs are located on private property. And the legislative intent behind the creation of the fund was to fund projects on public and private property. But to date, those projects have not been awarded, especially in rural areas. So we're kind of at the tip of the spear because the Middle Peninsula PDC was one of the first localities in the Commonwealth to have an approved resilience plan to make us eligible for the grant funds, but there's just been a disconnect with how to shape projects that can benefit private property. So the question regarding bridges earlier, we were able to get an award to focus on a bridge, but it was a publicly owned bridge. I suspect that it would be hard to get anything funded on private property as things stand. DCR is very aware, and the new administration is very aware of this challenge we've had getting projects funded on private property. And I suspect you'll see some changes to kind of make it more clear for how these funds can be expended to meet all the properties, privately owned properties that have resilience needs, especially in the Rappahannock watershed.
Yes, thank you for that, Kurt. Yes, Middle Peninsula has definitely, I think, broken the record on the amount of applications put into the community flood preparedness fund, which is great. And I noted earlier that the grant manual will be up for public comment early spring next year, so that like Kurt referred to, it might be something that they address. One of the difficulties that DCR has had is the designation that they wish to prioritize community scale based projects, and they haven't really defined that very clearly for applicants to know what that means. And from what we've heard is that they plan to address those comments in the new grant manual. Yes. I'll chime in on the Rappahannock Regional Commission's application. DCR had asked for some additional information on our application, and we recently are waiting to hear about that by the end of the month. I think there's a number of things that weren't in the grant manual that I'm assuming will be in the next grant manual, but they're saying, our clarification points. New things that are now being requested, and not a big deal, just little things. They wanted to see an application, and it is for a regional resiliency plan to be developed through our hazard mitigation plan process. So hopefully we get to do that next year.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Well, thank you for your comments today.
Thank you.
Moving on to our next presentation, summary of discussion of the Rappahannock Roundtable Symposium. Right. You were able to attend. It was, we're not able to attend. It was a great event, and we had lots of great presentations. Lots of information for our locality to be presented at.
Don't mind, I'll take a minute, but didn't pass it around. While they go around, I will say that Ryan Hoffman, apologize for not being here. He was at the Stormwater Conservation District annual meeting. so he's not able to attend, so he apologized for not being here, and you can consider me a poor substitute for him. So if you do not know what the Rappahannock Roundtable is, if you're new to it, the Rappahannock Roundtable is call it a consortium of partners from the mountains to Chesapeake Bay and the Rappahannock River watershed that provides kind of a sort of this clearinghouse for technical assistance and information sharing on all topics related to the Rappahannock watershed. So on the website for the Rappahannock Roundtable, you can find tabs for things like cost share opportunities, grant opportunities, the latest in science going on in the watershed. Basically, anything that is related to topics that are germane to conservation of the Rappahannock River, you will be able to find those at the Roundtable website over time. So this brings us to this year on October 19, 2022. We were able to hold the second annual Rappahannock River Symposium in Fredericksburg. And this was basically a whole day conference that brought together a consortium of attendees. You can see that list from the handout. It's quite extensive, folks from all over the state and out of state as well, from many different industries, government, non-government, government, and everything in between for attendees and presenters as well. So there was a total of 109 total participants this year, including presenters and staff. I think that's probably a third jump over last year that was held as well. And so really we owe a debt of gratitude to Chairman Bellows for attending and introducing. We were able to invite and have Dr. Candace Boyd, who is the director of the Chesapeake Bay program, show up to give opening remarks. And I know there's a number of you all in this room who were able to attend, and it's much appreciated that you all attended as well. Highly recommend that if you weren't able to make it this year with all in person. 2 years ago, it was kind of hybrid. I think there was some issues with the hybrid nature of it. So we moved it all to in person, and going forward, the hope is that it'll be all in person going forward. So there was an excellent diversity of topics and speakers. Honestly, I think the success of the symposium really reflects well on Brian Hoffman's ability to network and get people together to talk about things. And this is kind of a manifestation of that. If you know Brian, you know that's what he's good at. And so this is kind of this is the byproduct of that ability to network. So there was lots of resource and information sharing. So things to stress really this event is for resource and information sharing, networking, peer-to-peer learning. I think one of the things that comes out to me is the peer-to-peer learning. I remember a conversation that went on between the Northern and Conservancy and the Piedmont Environmental Council. There was some things that they were able to talk about. They hadn't really connected in person before, that they were able to talk about some land conservation and easements. So that was kind of the kind of thing you don't see at any other place besides maybe this type of symposium. Multitude of partners got valuable one-on-one time with grant funders. So there was some liaisons from NIFWIC that were there. And so there was some NGOs that got some great feedback on potential new project ideas that could bring funding conservation to the region. And then finally, just some highlights. Things that I found that stood out were that were popular. There were funding related presentations like accessing NIFWIC grant opportunities and workshops, as well as there was a presentation given by Lower Wetlands Watch staff on the CFPF and how localities can apply to that. There were a couple of very popular presentations on accessing carbon markets, both for rural and urban landowners. There was a very robust discussion that some of you all were in the room for on living shorelines for upstream MS4 compliance, which is kind of an interesting topic that is gaining some more steam. There's a lot to be done. There's been some good early feedback from government regulators on that. And then My favorite was ecological indicators of habitat for oyster reefs. Friends of the Rappahannock is going to be greatly increasing our oyster restoration work in the next few years with some significant funding. And so one of the things with that is figuring out what we have on the reefs that we're going to be restoring before we put our shell and our oysters down, so we can maximize the funds that we have to make them go farther and do the best possible restoration that we can. Are there any questions? I know there was some of you all in the room, if you'd like to share kind of what was there, pieces of the those.
I was able to attend. It was well planned out. The hardest part was figuring out which of the conversations wanted to attend, because they broke about the small groups, which was nice because you had a chance to establish some relationships. So, and to ask more questions on particular topics. So I thought it was well done.
Any other questions or comments? Thank you. Let's see, update from our technical committee and stakeholder perspectives on utility scale solar. Eldon?
You start, and then I'll let you say anything if you want, or some folks in this room who attended many of the meetings. At the December 2021 meeting of this commission a year ago, right here, the commission asked the technical committee look at issues surrounding development of utility scale solar. The technical committee, which meets monthly from March through November, pretty much dedicated the primary purpose of their meetings for the entire year for that purpose. The chairman and I sat down early in the year trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to do this? I mean, the direction was look at the issues surrounding utility scale solar, which was a pretty broad charge. And so we had to talk about what that meant. And what we agreed to is that there are a variety of perspectives. We just needed to say, okay, perspectives. So what we ended up doing, we ended up with 19 different presentations to the technical committee over that period of time. Each of the planning districts spoke to the group on behalf of their jurisdictions. The Farm Bureau on behalf of the ag community. I think some representatives of the ag community got together and decided that Andrew Smith was the guy to do it. Unfortunately, fortunately, Andrew no longer is with the Farm Bureau. He's now deputy director of DCR. And then we heard from DEQ, Department of Energy, and Department of Forestry. Then 4 conservation agency organizations, the Nature Conservancy, the Bay Foundation, PEC, and the Friends of the Rappahannock. Then an extensive presentation from Dr. Daniels, who you heard mentioned earlier from Virginia Tech, on soil and soil compaction on the back end of projects and what that means. And we've heard about the acid soils in Spotsylvania, and as was referenced earlier. Then from the Energy Right Virginia on property rights interests. Then Tommy helped us by pulling together information from the Commissioners of Revenue and Virginia Tax on some information there, and I'm going to come back to that in just a second. We then heard from representatives of solar developers, then from Dominion, and then the Old Dominion Electric Cooperative. And we kept asking along the way, are there other people we need to hear from? And I think we exhausted all the different perspectives. Obviously, with hundreds of pages, and you see all the meetings, if you go, you pick up March of 2022 and go up, you have recordings, you have meeting notes, you have any slide presentations. We got lots of pages of material. Obviously, I don't have a written report for you yet. That's going to come in early 23 once we get past the General Assembly session. The plan going forward is we'll create a draft document. Jillian will be helping me write it, and we'll put it back out to all those presenters and all the people who participated in the meetings over the course of the year. Okay, what did we get right? What did we get wrong in terms of capturing perspectives? and then identify where there's alignment, where you had different groups telling us the same message of things that we should know, and where you have friction. Then take those comments back, turn it into a final document that really will be a kind of a resource for all of our members, our jurisdictions, our members of the assembly of, here are all the issues. And they're complex and they're interrelated and they're overlapping. The technical committee has one recommendation at this preliminary stage, and it comes out of the discussion with the commissioners of revenue and Virginia tax. And Phil, since you're the only member of the House here and the senator had to leave, I'm going to say this to you so you'll understand what we heard. The rules relative to local revenue and taxation have changed almost annually every year for the last 7 or 8 years. It's become very confusing. I would, and I'm going to invite my commissioner friend here to correct me where I get it wrong. I would say that they have improved from a local government revenue and a revenue management and a project management standpoint, because the user agreement, the siting agreement statute that Delegate Hodges patroned a few years back really empowered both the solar developer and localities to better work out project financing or project tax structure on a case-by-case basis, which has actually made it better for everybody. Having said all that, the technical committee would say to this commission and to the legislative members especially, we need to let the dust settle. Don't make any more changes for a couple of years because of the confusion that's been caused. I mean, local commissioners are like, okay, what rules do I operate under? And they work, and the state tax department works very hard to help them and support them. And compliments go to Virginia tax. But we really need to get this. The moving target needs to stop moving for a little while, sure, is what we heard. And with that, that's the only kind of consensus recommendation that's come out of what we've done so far. There will be others as we pull this together.
The only target that I have as far as like local tax related legislation would be to remove the sunset from the car tax bill that I submitted last session. That would be it. That would impact anything else. The only thing I would be looking at maybe next year would be removing the sunset clause from the car tax bill that I submitted that gave localities that ability to adjust the car tax.
Yeah,
so that's the only thing that's really on my radar that would impact. Now, state level, that's a different ballgame.
Well, there are a lot of competing proposals. I haven't heard any proposals relative to solar. We've heard rumblings that there might be something. And what we're saying is, from the perspective of local management of these projects, which includes working directly with the solar developers who are trying to bring projects that they can make work in a jurisdiction. Let's let the rules kind of age a little bit before we look at what changes we may discover going forward we need to make. Is that a fair? You participated in many of the meetings.
No, I agree. I would just reiterate that it was, I thought, very beneficial to us taking on this challenge. It was sort of a big thing and somewhat controversial. I mean, it's a controversial topic across the Commonwealth and across our jurisdictions in one way or another. But I thought it was good to bring all the different bodies together to have a discussion. And at the end, we will have a good resource to rely back on, whether we're developing, develop our ordinances locally, strengthening them, or building those relationships with the developers and making the best of those investments and the proper development within our individual communities, which is very unique depending on where you are in the basin. So looking forward to bringing that final report to the commission sometime next year. With that, are any other comments about that? Or our last topic here, discussion of potential legislative items. for the General Assembly coming up. Kevin, I believe you have something you want to bring up.
Yeah, in our Rappahannock River, the watershed here, wetlands banks, we're basically down to one. Staff, Spotsylvania County, King George, the actual bank that's left is in King George County. If you bring any kind of industrial or commercial development in, the impact wetlands, of course, you can't touch RPA, but you can impact wetlands, but you have to buy wetlands credits. Here in the Rappahannock River Basin, those wetlands credits are exceeding around 100,000 or more. Where if we push it down and we go into the southern river basin, which is 3/4 of my county, because in York River Basin, those credits are more affordable, more than the $25,000 to $35,000 range, and you have a more abundance of wetlands banks that you can get credits from. We've gotten to a point where we're trying to get under we're trying to keep pollution down and protect our wetlands, but the efforts that we've got to find a way to continue to grow. Because you've got to create tax revenue. It's a revolving circle. If we don't have the money that's created from these industrial and these commercial projects, the tax revenue for the state, we can't continue to put money into these projects that we're doing to fix it. So it's getting to the point where in a region when I can go further south on a site and it costs me $25,000 for a wetlands credit, and here it costs me $100,000. It really affects the competition level.
Right.
And Mr. Chairman, Kevin reached out to me yesterday with raising the issue, and I reached out to Andrew Clark with the Home Builders Association just to get a feel for what they were seeing statewide. And he said, yeah, it's more acute where we are and in some parts of the state than others, but that in 2013, bipartisan bill passed that created an in lieu fund to be managed by DEQ, where if you had a situation like that, instead of buying the credit, you pay into the fund that the state could use to help facilitate wetlands protection or enhancement as a kind of a choice of last resort. That program has never been fully established. And so the home builders are working with Delegate Conyer on some legislation and possibly budget amendment to give DEQ some additional resources so they can stand the program up. They put it on the books, but never resourced it so that it could really be established. And it requires some negotiation or some approval from the Corps of Engineers. It's kind of unclear at this point where that stands. So you may hear some about that. That isn't going to be something that solves the problem right away. It's going to take time because if the assembly acts, there's going to be work that's going to have to take place in the next year or so to make it happen. And it's going to require pulling together, I would imagine, an array of stakeholders to do that without causing more friction, but to do it in a way that people are agreeable to. With that, we do need to be looking for other alternatives. And as I said to Kevin, I remember being in conversations 10 years ago. You probably remember similar ones where, okay, we're moving towards closing the gap between where the pollution needs to be and where it is. And we hope to do that by 2025. That's always been the target. Well, we reach that, then we have to operate under the cap and still have economic growth. And here we are, we're now on the cusp of that. And these are the kind of problems that are going to grow. Now, there was legislation that Delegate Bulova carried a couple of years ago to address some problems in Stanford that were similar, and to allow a broader expansion of where you would address the issue than the immediate hydrologic unit. And that helped, but that was just a, kind of a stopgap measure. So
Could some of these large scale solar projects that have large protected areas that they've leased that became, are basically wetlands, could those not become wetlands banks potentially? If you lease 1,000 acres of solar, you only develop a few hundred acres, but surrounding it is large surroundings.
it sounds like an opportunity in a siting agreement that could be negotiated.
So it sounds like there could be some opportunity in things like that. Potentially. Yeah. It's at least something that
you could do that with, that could actually be done under existing law. But I mean, you talked about something that the county's talking about doing.
Well, when we're looking at property, I talked to the county administrator actually before I came in here to see where we could build a wetlands mitigation bank.
Yeah, or if you have large lengths of county property that happen to be covered in wetlands, could that become a bank? Your own bank?
Yeah, something we're gonna look into because it's we don't want to get priced out, and that's what's happening with these wetlands credits right now. It's getting to the point where it's one of them. We probably not unique to ours, but we have 3 different watersheds: James, New York, and of course Rappahannock. All going to the bay, which is what we focus and you have the ability to move credits among those basins is very limited. So it causes this location of credits.
Perhaps it's just more taking a look at what can be considered a bank and how we can capitalize on some of the things that are technically kind of banks now and implement those into being more long-term banks. Because if you're tying up development in a solar project for 25 years, there's not going to be any development in that wetlands areas anyhow, and it's kind of protecting it in a way.
I am going to say that I'm looking to the NGOs that are sitting in the room, and I've seen making notes. I'm hoping that there's some bright ideas that will come from that arena, because that's where a lot of our good ideas and these kind of things come from. And
one of the projects that you referred to, which is the upstream stream bank and other kinds of programs, I think creating some wetlands. Kevin and I both serve on something called the Lake County Advisory Committee, and there's some real issues about the watershed there as it feeds into a man-made lake that creating some additional wetlands and diversions and other kinds of things upstream could pay some major benefits in lots of different areas, including the wetlands bank as well as the lake itself. These are huge projects.
Wrong, as well, wrong rivershed though, we're in the York River there.
Yeah, and that's that is the York, but
Yeah.
My point is it all goes to the bay.
Yeah.
That's really,
I'm with you.
where the focus on. Yeah, we want to be parochial about the Rappahannock to some extent.
Even down there, next to the woods, we have living shorelines and things like that that are being created. To me, could be considered basically wetlands banks.
Right.
Yes.
Wait, I need Elvin and your help on this. I realize I'm speaking on another river now. Longwood College, in Westmoreland County. It was doing a farm. It's close to now Howard. And I was inclined to think, and I've been there 2 or 3 occasions for water programs on the Tacoma. And somebody helped me, maybe Ronnie, you can help me. I thought that they were in the land business of creating. Matter of fact, I think I'm not wrong in saying they created 1 or 2 or 300 acres of wetlands.
That's been some years ago, though, hasn't it?
Oh, Whole Springs Farm.
Yes. I'm just bringing it up because to the best of my knowledge, there's acreage there, and I don't know how expensive it would be when it was a gift to start with. Somebody help me. I just don't know enough to talk about it, but I'm aware of it.
I can elaborate a little bit. Longwood University owns a Whole Springs Farm, and they did a large wetlands project, and I think they use RES. That's who they partnered with. So that's to my knowledge, that's what I know.
That could be potentially another avenue to look at, because colleges across the Commonwealth have been bequested land left and right and hold these in their assets. And that could become another potential bank and potential income to those colleges and universities instead of just sitting on that land.
I understand James Madison University owns a parcel in the Commonwealth.
Could community flood preparedness funds be used to develop wetlands banks?
I don't see why not, because there's plenty of studies and papers out there that show how wetland and species help reduce storm surge. So I mean, if anything, we could apply for a study grant just to see and kind of locate those areas first, and then use that underground the product implementation grant.
I'm seeing Kevin making the.
Yeah, definitely. And this, this came in light over a project that is, qualifies for an APIC grant through the state. Where it's an agricultural based business. And it's, when you actually to qualify for that grant, you have to be producing your products and selling your product here in the state of Virginia, which is a great thing. Very environmentally conscious group that wants to do this. And it's hydroponic style farming. It's one, I've got one thing that's good for the environment. And some of the rules are working against something that's actually, we're beating our heads together on this one because of the price of wetlands credits. So makes a difference.
So what's it's a chicken and the egg, I think. I mean, it's a matter of interpretation on what qualifies as a wetland credit. So who's going to be the final arbiter on this? I guess I'm a little confused on, I mean, we're all talking about all these great ideas, but
I'm gonna look to see if there are other, I can phone a friend here that I didn't come prepared to. I mean, you end up with dealing with PDQ, you end up dealing with the Corps of Engineers.
right.
And it's, I always think of the Corps as the final arbiter, but if you've got a state agency running interference for you, that's who you work through.
Depends on the project. Is what it amounts to.
Yes, both of those entities potentially.
That seems to me like what we could try to drive around is some more clarity about what can become a wetlands bank and how we can try to increase certain things we already know are wetlands to become banks.
You might do a primer on what exactly a wetland bank is, how they're created in the first place.
Yeah.
Let's see, I think we just jumped to an agenda item 11.
Basically, you tear it up and got a bank system. Let's go ahead.
Just this issue keeps coming up, and it's obviously a big issue in my district with the Brook Road flooding that was happening, where we have flooding and we have roads and bridges that are impacted. And there seems to be this thing where we say, okay, well, the environmental folks should fix this. No, VDOT fix it. And it just kind of gets kicked back and forth. So on that, if there's anything we can do and your creative solutions that you all come up with, to kind of figure out where those two connect and where we can find some funding for those situations, because they're here and there right now, but I think they're going to continue as we see more issues, and it's very frustrating for us in the localities to try and find solutions and to get kind of batted back and forth from one to the other. And so,
Any other comments or issues that you'd like to see the legislature address this term? Their list won't be long enough already.
I don't know how much I'll be able to address, like, filing deadline was December 1st. So, we start conversations for next conversation.
that's fine too.
You just for that makes a great time to do it. Election meeting.
We did create a resilience plan.
You have a plan that was.
There was a resilience plan that was created. We did apply for some funding. We did not get that funding. My understanding is they're now applying for more funding.
So should let your representatives know to allocate everything.
I will, as soon as my staff tells me what it was we applied for, that I found out in a meeting yesterday. So I'll be calling you.
Well, thank you all for attending. Our future meeting dates in the spring will be in King George County. June will be in Essex County, Ronnie. Okay. Jim, back in the fall, we'll be back up your way in Orange County and then back here again, of course, their December meeting next Christmas season.
And I have been made a reach out to our King George rep, Jeffrey Stonehill, about location and if they have anything they'd like the commission to see kind of on the ground. And I say that to Ronnie and to Jim, if be thinking if you've got some stuff you want us to see on the ground, we'd like to incorporate that opportunity in as long as the weather cooperates.
Yeah, we've struck out a lot of time for the weather, but we have that. You're not going to spend kind of a nice addition to our agenda to kind of some of the fruits of our labor is actually on the ground. I guess you have the other item, you have Mike rolling on there.
Yeah, he was supposed to be with us for this meeting. Drew ended up taking his place because his boss, the secretary, called him. He might let me know about 2 weeks ago. He'd been assigned a different task by his secretary to occur on this afternoon, so he had to bail on us. He'll be with us in King George in March.
Okay. Without any further comment, we will stand adjourned. Thank you all for coming, and Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone.
Happy holidays, everyone.
Thank you all, everyone.